Hey, what's up YouTube? This is part one of my soft top Carson top build on the Model A. So step one was build a visor. It's made out of 1-inch thick oak with a 1/2-inch bevel on the front and top and bottom. I have embedded piano hinges, the width of the hinge into the visor on both sides, and then there'll be a second portion of 1-inch oak that the hinge is attached to flushly, and then the conduit is going to rise up and then attach to that portion that rotates up and down. So that's the hinge for the clamshell. I think it turned out rather well. I really like having the visor on there. Perhaps I'll make a version for when the top is not on the car. So the bottom of the visor has, I routed it to fit over the portion of the what remains of the windshield, and it has a 7-degree slant to it. So the posts are already slanted forward at 2 degrees. Now with a 7-degree slant inside of the visor, so it gives it a 9-degree rake, which I think is about appropriate for how much the top needs to rise, level out, and then come back down to fit my head. So this is part one. Part two, I've got some ideas now that I have the front pretty much worked out, and obviously this is going to get shaped and contoured to fit better with the top once I have a more visual idea of how it's going to work. So I want to build the back portion now, kind of work back to front and then meet in the middle. I picked up some 3/4 inch, or I think it's 1/2-inch conduit. It's pretty light for being steel, so I can bend it and weld it at certain areas. However, I want this top to be light. It's going to be mostly cloth, resin, and a little bit of conduit. So last night it occurred to me that I could make a fiberglass copy of this whole back lip. You know, if I drape this in a polyurethane plastic that epoxy won't stick to, then I could get, I could lay strips all over it in fiberglass resin to get a copy of it. So it would be like a negative underside of the top as it comes up, and it would lock in perfectly every time, because I'd probably have about a 1/2 inch on the inside and maybe a 1/4 inch on the outside that hung over the lip, so it would grab it tightly every time. So I'm going to run down to the hardware store or a hobby shop and see what they have in the way of fiberglass and resin and drop cloths that resin won't stick to, and see if I can essentially cast this lip. And then once I have a thin layer of fiberglass, maybe something as simple as 1/8 inch wood. So once I have the lip cast, then I epoxy little wood strips to it, and then another layer of fiberglass over that, and that would essentially be the back bow. And I think I could shave off, a pound or two by making the bottom base out of wood and fiberglass, very thin pine or something, rather than having another bow. Because right now I think I'm going to have the conduit on the windows, conduit above the head, and then like a half bow that kind of brings the top back down. So that already is probably 3-4 pounds of conduit. So if I can shave off a little bit, I think that's going to pay off in the end. And I've never really messed with fiberglass on a project like that, and I do enjoy trying things new. So that's the update with part one, and kind of a description of how part two is going to play out. But I really like it so far. And lastly, I got a message last night on the motor. Someone asked how I converted it from EFI to a carburetor. Maybe I misspoke in a previous email, but it was never fuel injected. It was the emissions vacuum system out of a '79 Mustang. So I just plugged all the vacuum and emission ports and slapped a 2-barrel Holley carburetor on it, and it's been great. It's pretty common for these 2300 motors. If someone is doing a EFI to carb swap, I imagine, and you could just research it on the internet, but I imagine it's as simple as getting a carbureted manifold and putting it on the EFI motor, taking off the whole fuel rail system and plugging up all the things that don't need to be used. And then lastly, I'll say, my dog's going ballistic. Lastly, I'll say that if you do put a carb on these motors, specifically this Holley, you have to have an inch spacer in here to rise the carb up so the linkages don't hit the valve cover. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. If you have comments or questions, leave them below. Thanks. Bye.